So, when Apple revealed its revolutionary new iPhone 8 just a couple of months ago, it got me thinking. Yes, it's an amazing phone with amazing specs, just like the rest of Apple's lineup. And they kind of focused on one thing, and that was the revolutionary new design that was basically like an iPhone 7, had a baby with an iPhone 4. And they called it a revolutionary new glass design. And as you guys know, if you've been following Apple for any longer than about 6 or 7 years, you'll know that Apple used to use glass sandwich designs in their iPhone 4 and 4S. And that got me thinking. So I'm going to look at the iPhone 4 and I'm going to see if it's good enough to use in 2017. Before we get into that, I just want to say that yes, I know the glass design means that you can enable wireless charging on the iPhone 8, and I think that's great. I'm glad they're using Qi wireless charging as well. It's not a proprietary standard. That's great. Everything's gone and done. But it's still quite funny how they said that. Firstly, the standout feature of the iPhone 4 is its design. It's a glass sandwich. Though it's not like a typical glass sandwich that you see nowadays, like from the S6, the S7, the iPhone 8 itself. You'll notice that the glass tapers into the design and it really smooths out any kind of rough edges on the outside. And people have been doing amazing things at these big companies designing this stuff and making it really taper and connect. Whereas the iPhone 4 wasn't quite like that. It was quite literally a glass sandwich. Very rough edges, you had like 2 pieces of glass with a bit of metal in the middle, and that was it. There weren't any tapers, there weren't really any chamfers, it was all just kind of like a sandwich. It was a very rough sandwich, and it was a great phone at the time. It revolutionised high pixel density displays. They called it the Retina display, 320 odd ppi, and we've still got that in iPhones today, apart from the iPhone 10, which I believe is near enough 400 or 500 ppi. And that means that yes, you get to see more on the screen. You can actually up your resolution in most Android phones, actually enable you to see more on the screen. Of course, you can't do this on Apple phones, but it's great that it started that trend. And of course, Apple are now, renowned for having low resolution displays. I don't think they're low resolution by any means, I just don't think they're super high resolution. It's stuck on an old version of iOS and it's not looking too good in terms of its performance figures. I actually have a couple of things written down, but for some reason my iPhone isn't showing me them right now because I can't connect to Google Docs, my Wi-Fi is down. But I do know for the fact that I believe it has 512 megabytes of RAM, which is the same as, I believe, the Series 3 Apple Watch, which is crazy, and it's definitely less than the iPhone 7 and 8. I believe they're 2 and 3 gigabytes of RAM respectively, and that's crazy. Of course, now we've gone up to phones that have like 6 to 8 gigs of RAM in Android phones. This had 512 megs, and what's crazy is I can remember my computer at home when I first got a computer that had 512 megs of RAM as well. It was mad. One thing about the design that wasn't great about the iPhone 4 though is the hilarious thing with the antenna bands. The antenna lines that you see on phones, on the back of iPhones, you kind of think they're a bit obtrusive, they're a bit annoying. Well, the reason that they're there is because in the iPhone 4 it didn't have this. It had little tiny antenna lines on the outside of the little metal rail, but it didn't have them on the back. And so it looks arguably better. But when people held the phone up to their ear, because they were almost gripping it in a way that was covering the antenna lines on the side, it meant that people lost signal. Now that sounds silly, but that's exactly what happened with a lot of iPhone 4s, and in the 4S I believe they revised this, they made this better, but it's quite funny how they managed to do that with an iPhone 4. And remember, this phone wasn't cheap. It was like retailing at £500-600, which is crazy. And hold your phone like a normal person and suddenly the signal cuts out. The hilariously large top and bottom bezels meant that the screen, the 3.5-inch screen, which is tiny by today's standards, looked even smaller because it was almost engulfed by this entire huge body of a phone. I think it's fantastic. I absolutely love the design. I'm really a fan of the iPhone design. I really like rectangular 16:9 displays. I think they should be just the standard, really. I have one right here. Okay, the one over there is 21:9, but that's a standard. And these 18.5 and 18:9 displays, just don't like them. So in a way, the iPhone 4 does have a redeeming feature on the display side of things. This phone is 7 years old. I was 11 when this phone came out. That makes me feel old, and I'm not old at all. So yeah, it's amazing how crazy things have come since then. Of course, we've gone from 512 megs of RAM to 2 gigabytes of RAM in the base model. We've gone from 4 or 8 gigabytes in the base model to, I believe it's 32 now in the iPhone 8. Not really sure. Hopefully it is. Hopefully I didn't get that wrong. We've gone from like 5 megapixel cameras all the way up to 12. We did go up to 16 for a bit, but in iPhones we're still at 12, and I like 12. 12 is not in any way worse than 16. It's all about other things to do with the sensor. sensor and other things to do with the lens, the glass, the aperture and the angle of the lens and stuff. So I do like that, and I'm glad that we've got everything sorted there. But it's crazy to see how far we've come in 7 years. Of course, we've switched out the 30-pin connector for the lightning. Got rid of the headphone jack, which is, yeah, a bit annoying. We've seen Touch ID come and go. Of course, we've got Touch ID on modern iPhones apart from the iPhone 10 with its own Face ID. So we've really seen quite a lot in those 7 years. And I think it's crazy to see what's happened, like even specifically in the Apple world. Of course, Apple phones are renowned for being behind the curve. I think that it's crazy even within that little circle to see how far we've come. Of course, Steve Jobs died, and it really changed how the company worked, essentially. This was a company that was pioneering the, consumer PC with the iMac, or, consumer computer, and really brought computers to home, to everyone. And the same with the iPod. Brought music to millions of people. And we now have designs like the Magic Mouse 2 with the charging port on the bottom of it. Like, seriously, it's just ridiculous how far Apple has come, but also, for the worse, has absolutely changed and almost demoralized most people in the Apple world as a true fan, because they're taking away what made Apple Apple. Apple was the company that took risks, and yes, they're taking risks now, but I don't think they're quite the same kinds of risks. Risks like the different colours that they had for their iPod and iMac compared to taking away the headphone jack, which I think is, yes, it's a risk, but I really don't think that port should be taken away. If anything, and I know you're going to hate me, Apple fanboys, if anything, they should take away the lightning connector. And you might think that's stupid, but we have wireless charging, right? And we have wireless transfer, we have Wi-Fi, we have 4G. So why should that be any different to a headphone jack? And bringing us back to the iPhone 4, I think that if you really want to keep one as a collector's item, then it's a great idea. If you might want to give one to your kid as a first phone, of course they still work over cellular and they still work with text messages and stuff. But in terms of a real world everyday phone, you see an iPhone 4 for 40 quid, you think, wow, that's at least, that's under 10% of a normal iPhone. I could just buy that and use that instead. It's not quite going to work. You're on old software that's 4 revisions old now, 4 generations old. That means that there's going to be limited support in terms of its apps, if support at all. The camera's going to be dreadful in low light. It's going to be a shoddy experience overall, because it's not actually running an OS that it was designed for, which I believe was iOS 5. It's all changed, and it's all made things a bit different in terms of the running the applications. Of course, modern CPUs are way ahead of what we had 7 years ago. We've now got 6 times the amount of RAM in our iPhones. And so you have to remember that those modern apps are catered to that, and they don't cater to the old hardware because it's pre-64-bit, it's pre-iPhone 5S, and that is going to make the world of difference in terms of its performance. So guys, should you get the iPhone 4 as a daily driver? Absolutely not, unless you're crazy or you're doing a challenge, then that's pretty cool. Let me know if you're doing a challenge in the comments. Anyway, please let me know what you think of these videos where I stand in front of the camera. I've tried so hard to make it kind of better, but at the moment there's just a lot of sunlight and I have to keep changing the aperture on the camera because for some reason it just gets brighter and brighter. I mean, I live in Cornwall. What's going on here? Anyway, again, my name's been Ryan Thomas with Failtech. Please do like this video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it. Tell me in the comments what you think about these kinds of videos and about the iPhone 4, and if you want to see any kinds of videos, let me know and I'll try and get to them, although most of them are difficult to get to because I can't actually afford to buy anything right now. And please do subscribe if you're new around here to never miss a video like this one. My name's been Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.